Thank you, JJ. All right, thanks. Welcome, everybody. You're not here to see me, you're here to see General Woodworth, but before I introduce him, let me say thank you for your support. We could not do what we do here without the support of the membership, the people who come to see our speakers. It truly is an honor for me to be here and recognizing all of you. Just for a moment, just take a look around. Just look at the room. Look at the chandeliers. So a great story. When General Nella came to speak, it was about a year ago. The former commandant came up to speak. General Nella, the warrior, right? The hardcore Marine, go kill him on the battlefield kind of. He's sitting in this room looking up going, hey, Badfinger, those chandeliers are crystal. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess they are. Well, you don't know anything about General Nella. He loves crystal. He loves crystal. So if you ever see General Nella and you want to put him off his game, talk about crystal chandeliers at the Marines Memorial, because he said, do you know the investment in these is just, I said, well, do you want to buy one? I can't afford any of these. But that being said, truly thank you. This is wonderful. This is one of my favorite rooms, the Crystal Lounge. It's absolutely a fabulous place. We've been around since 1946. You heard JJ, I won't reiterate though. Your donations help us educate, commemorate, and serve, and put together a series as such. And today we have the honor of a good friend of mine, and I know one person is going to be on his best behavior because it's his boss, Marty, Trainwreck. But Woody, it's great. We were together. We served together. He's actually been here as a military advisory council for the board, and he went on to bigger, better things. We actually served together in the Pentagon, but we'll stay away. That's another combat zone we'll stay away from. Fortunate enough to be selected for Brigadier General. He's a fighter pilot by trade. We served together at Miramar, and I dare say Renee and the family are friends of the Roccos. So Woody, without any further ado, thank you for taking the time. Oh, by the way, he's on leave. Him and his family are at Salt Lake City. He flew in just to come here, honor his commitment, and then he's flying back tomorrow morning. So Woody, can't thank you enough. Welcome. Thank you very much.
All right, how's everybody doing? It's like one of those friendly crowds, you know, you can just ruin it from here. I can ruin it from here, y'all can't ruin it. So let me start with, about 3 weeks ago, a friend of mine who's an Air Force 2-star I went to Capstone with, was passing through San Francisco on her way from Hawaii to the Pentagon, and she took a picture down in the lobby with the ridiculous sized picture of my ugly face and her daughter standing next to it, and my teenager happened to be standing next to me at the time that the text come in, and I tapped on the picture, and my daughter just goes, oh my God, Dad, that's hideous. So I apologize for the pictures and the things on the program. You can blame my parents for that. Every time I walk in this place, so I get out of the car from the airport or the cab or walk down the street and come in this place, it's absolutely humbling to be in these halls. You know, you get off the elevator on the 4th floor and you got all the Marines with Medal of Honor winners there on the walls, and you move up the levels and go to the different, the library and all these just incredible spaces, and maintaining that heritage that Marines Memorial Club and Hotel and Marines Memorial Association and Foundation do so well is absolutely humbling, and I'm truly thankful to all of you who are members, board members, Lieutenant General Rocco, sir, ma'am, Ms. Susan. Thank you for inviting me. It is a privilege to be here today with you. I will try to keep my remarks brief and leave plenty of room for questions. 45 minutes. So Trainwreck is as General Rocco pointed out, is the CEO of Miramar. My old job, by the way, the poor guy, he has my old job, and now I'm his boss. So poor him. He's got an awesome wife. At least Rebecca's here to support him and help him if it goes terrible. If he asks the wrong question, just don't ask the wrong question, Trainwreck. But what I'd like to talk about today is I'd like to start talking a little bit about Marines of today, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about what I view as kind of an observer of the operational forces, and then I'll talk a little bit about the installations world, and we can anchor there and talk a little bit more about that, and then I'll give you kind of my perspective on force design. And I know there's a little bit of controversy there. I'm happy to talk about it and take questions. I'm kind of an open book, so if I don't hit something, you want to come back to it, please don't hesitate to ask. I will start with the young Marines that today truly stand ready to serve when and where the nation calls them to. They come from all walks of life, all backgrounds, from cities, from farms. Our tallest Marine is 6'11". Our shortest Marine is 4'8". That's a big difference. He runs a 300 PFT and CFT. 4'8", right? They're fast, they're strong, and they're capable. And they join to be challenged and to discover their own internal strength and see what's there. And to try to rise to the occasion when asked by their nation to do what they've been called to do. And these same young men and women, different generations, have done it since our Corps began, both in peace and in war, on beaches and on blocks, from Bellawood to Baghdad, Iwo Jima to Kabul. They represent truly what is best about America and what is best about us today. I will tell you they're better than they were when we joined 30 years ago. Hoops and I are about the same time frame. Darren's in here somewhere, the judge, about the same time frame. I'll tell you, they're better than we were. I have no doubt about it. They still take the mantle of arms to live a life of service over self and sacrifice over comfort. And when times seem hard, and sometimes lately this nation's been a little bit separated, they truly remind me personally of the greatness of this place and the call to service that they follow. And I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to point out the young man in the blue t-shirt in the back with the EGA on his chest. Russell Judd from Fresno, California. I was sitting at Thanks, Russ. Please sit down. So I was sitting at lunch. I had a late lunch over here next door, and some young man comes up to me and goes, "Oh, thanks for your service." I'm like, "How do you know I'm in the Marine Corps?" I'm like in a golf shirt and a pair of khakis, and he's like, "Oh, I saw your picture over there. I'm going to attend tonight." I'm like, "Oh." When do you ship? Going to boot camp in August. All right? Showed up tonight. Pretty cool. Awesome. So that's what we're talking about. We're going to get his buddy to join here too. Wyatt, right? We got you, man. We're watching you. That hair's okay. Our barbers can take care of that in about eight, maybe 10 seconds for you. And to be honest, as I thought about this speech and this conversation, I hope, I was a little bit nervous. And as General Rocco and I were walking down from the bar upstairs, he reminded me that the last speaker was some guy named Petraeus. Yeah, kind of never heard of that guy. The MFCG, General Smith was here a couple months ago. General Watson has been here. General Morris, the former CG of MCRD in the Western Recruiting Region, who recruited you. He's not here anymore. He's gone, by the way. But some pretty capable and amazing folks who've talked to you and talked to you a lot about the operational forces. And so my thought as I came here is, okay, what can an installation guy add? As General Rocco stopped by the room 15, 20 minutes, maybe it was a couple hours ago, seems like 15 minutes ago, sir. He said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm rewriting my speech, because the first one was not good. So I was going to talk to you about all this installation stuff and bore you to tears, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective as an observer of what's going on with the operational forces right now. And as a commanding general for Marine Corps Installations West, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, yes, it is a mouthful. It is all one command, and the base falls under the command, essentially. But all of the other bases in the region, with the exception of the depot and 29 Palms, fall under our command as well. What it does is it gives us the opportunity, me the opportunity to travel around to these other bases and stations and kind of see and get a flavor of what's going on with the MEF in their spaces. What do they need for training ranges? Obviously, one of our primary missions is support of the MEF. But what I wanted to anchor on here just a little bit is as I travel around, I will tell you that the MEF is in an incredible place right now. They are led by some of the finest human beings you'll ever meet. These are O.P. Smith type leaders. I am not kidding you. They're humble, they're kind, but they train their young men and women like nobody's business. I mean, hardcore. If you heard from G. Smith here not so long ago, you want to talk about a warfighter that's ready to go gunslinging anytime you want. That is the one you want leading you into battle, and he is the commanding general of 1 Marine Expeditionary Force. And so my viewpoint as I travel around is different than his, because he, you know, we were laughing at the bar upstairs with Carl a minute ago about, and Darren, what I see when I travel around. You know, I notice that the stop sign's crooked, and I notice that there's a pothole, or the light's not working, or one of my police officers is sleeping in his patrol vehicle or something like that. That's what you see when you're the base CG, right? But when I look at his team, right, so that's what he sees when he sees his team, is he sees all the things that aren't necessarily perfect, right? And so what I see is just absolutely magnificent. Whether it's MAG 13 and out at MCAS Yuma, the primary base in the Marine Corps for our F-35, our most capable Generation 5 platform. The largest concentration of F-35 in the world is in Yuma, Arizona, in the Marine Corps. And they are taking that platform and turning it into an absolute killing machine, which is designed to do, but it's designed typically to do it kind of independently. And they are networking the F-35 in a way that has not been thought of before. And what I would say to you is that things like how they're integrating their capability to support ground forces. They're getting ground forces radios and communication equipment so they can see systems, and I can't go into too much detail, but they can see some of the systems that are in the F-35 and be able to understand the battlefield, the battle space better from the ground perspective because they have these eyes in the sky. And so that's just one MAG. MAG 11 is taking the oldest platform, the best platform in the Marine Corps hoops still, all right? F-18 guys over here, sorry, we'll you know, bump knuckles or something later. They're taking the oldest platform in the Marine Corps, the F-18 Hornet, and they have integrated it with the F-35 in new and very unique ways. Essentially, where the F-35 is the eyeballs and looks out at the picture out of the battle space, including the sea, and the F-18s are doing missile-capable delivery type things into combat zones in new and innovative ways every single day. You look at some MAG at Camp Pendleton, I forget what that MAG is called, sir. Is it MAG 29, 30 now? He's going to give me the snake guns here in a second, I know. As a former commander of MAG 39, which is the skid MAG up at MCAS Camp Pendleton, with Hueys and Cobras. If you think of what you want in a close-in proximity fight, if you're going into into the battle, right, and you want a close proximity fight, somebody that's going to be in your eye in the sky with a small footprint, a lot of capability to kill things on the ground for you, but also can be a comm node, comm relay, and do it in small packages in small groups. The Huey Cobra community is that community. They can move people, they can move Marines, they can move stuff, they can move food, they can move all of that stuff as well, and they can do it from small footprints as we think about island hopping, campaigning type things in the Pacific. And truly, that what they are doing in MAG 39 under Colonel Mog Marvel right now is unique in the way they're looking at shipping and fighting in the ships in the littorals in and around the island campaign in the Pacific. When you look at the division, so I think Hoops was the G3 of the wing when I finished 05 command, and I went over there to be his assistant, and he was like, yeah, get out of here and go to be the wing planner up at the division for what was called Steel Night. And Steel Night is the 1st Marine Division exercise that they do in 29 Palms every year. They've done it probably since Lieutenant General Hamlin was a Lance Corporal. Sir, I forget when that was. I might have been in grade school. But they've done this exercise every year. And it is up in 29 Palms, and it's typically a force-on-force exercise. When I went up there, the first thing I did when I went is I say, can I see last year's plan? And then I went into the planning session and sat through, and I watched them rebuild the exact plan from last year. If you know 29 Palms, all of the valleys are oriented north-south. The good guys start in the south, the bad guys start in the north, and they do this. They meet, they fight. There's a reserve unit that comes in, there's a passage of lines, and they go through the passage of lines and they attack out the north in success. Literally, you could have taken the 2013 plan and the 2014 plan and overlaid them, and they were almost exactly the same without the same people in the room, because that's just how the division was thinking about combat, right? This last Steel Night, as an observer in December of 2022, it encompassed land and sea space all the way from Hunter Liggett up by Monterey into the desert, into the China Lake area, a little bit of Fort Irwin, 29 Palms, down over through Tucson where Tico lives, where the Air Force is, Yuma, all the way to about 100 miles out at sea, all doing island hopping, littoral campaigning with joint forces, integrated and interoperable, led by the division CG, General Watson, who you heard from. Completely different concept than was the Steel Night of old. And what General Smith and the 3rd Fleet participated. The 3rd Fleet, Hoops was a part of it. The 3rd Fleet participated, which is something, right? And it is absolutely just a magnificent exercise and a demonstration of the firepower that the division brings to bear. Not only the firepower, but their capability to communicate in and around with the joint forces. With the logistics group, what I see with them is they are working on operational logistics. Logistics is probably the most challenging part of any Pacific fight, right? Moving people and things across large, massive spaces. I think the terrain from the northern tip of Japan to the southern, or to Australia, is 15 Iraqs stacked on top of each other. We're talking long distances, right? So operational logistics is a day's process, not an hour's process that it has been for us in what we've been doing for the last 15 to 20 years. And MLG, first MLG, is looking at this from a totally new perspective. They are currently today in about 5 countries in the Pacific. I can't tell you where they are exactly. Building partnerships, building small little areas that they can use for future forces, creating networks, ensuring technology is interoperable, ensuring that there's a fuel supply system, ensuring that there's water supply system and food supply system, all within those littoral operation capability. And they're doing it every single day. Not just a deployed unit. This is teams of 10 to 15 Marines and leadership going over and building these relationships and partners truly in a unique way. So that's kind of my 30,000 foot viewpoint of what's going on with the MEF right now. It is not perfect, but they are absolutely getting after it in a new way that is making huge changes. Let me transition real quick to the installations perspective. By the way, my boss wrote an article here called Installations in Contested Environments. It'll be out in the Gazette if you're a subscriber to the Gazette in next month's magazine. It's worth a read. He describes a vignette of a war in the Pacific and how installations play a role in the war in the Pacific. So I'll commend that to you for your consideration in the future. When I was a new guy showing up at Miramar in 1997 as a young pilot, what I cared about on the base was what time is the field open, where do I get food, and what time's the O Club open. That's it. right? Everything else was completely secondary. Nothing else mattered. Occasionally, as a pilot, young pilot, I might have got a haircut here and there. That was about it, right? Those were the things that mattered to me. My perspective, I know Marty's perspective is a little bit different than that now. We have 3 priorities in MCI West. The first one is long-term viability installations. Second one is support to the MEF. Some would argue those are backwards. Many would argue those are backwards. I would tell you, when our kids and grandkids fight in the Marine Corps, the installations need to be just as capable, way more capable than they are today. And if we don't prioritize that as the #1 thing in the long run, making sure our ranges are better, our capabilities for power and resilience and reliability over time are as good as they possibly can be, we will start to lose that. We also have risk with the community. Our support in San Diego and in all of the areas around our bases and stations on the West Coast is absolutely magnificent, but that ebbs and flows. You all know how the support for the military leadership is right now. It ebbs and flows. And we need to be really careful about making sure that we are good neighbors. So those are, because if the public turns against having military in its communities, that becomes a problem. And that has happened a couple of times. El Toro is a perfect example of that kind of where the community kind of went a different direction than the Marine Corps was going, and next thing you know, Marine Corps was looking for a new home. They found a great new home. I'm actually thrilled that they're at Miramar. I think it's a better place in the big picture for proximity to ranges and other Marines. But we do put ourselves at risk if we don't have great partnerships with our communities. And then the last thing, so then the second one, of course, is support to the operational forces. And I'll talk a little bit about that, which is the focus of effort. And then the third is the non-negotiable, and that's support for Marines, sailors, and their families. And we'll talk a little bit about that one at the end. And it break down the middle one there for support to the MEF into 4 sections. I'll call them training, deployment, support, and redeployment. Training is about ranges, for the most part. But if I have to provide one thing that has nothing to do with ranges, but has everything to do with everything else on the base, and it has almost nothing to do with what the MEF wants, but it facilitates everything. Anybody know what it is? Oops. Power. Right? So energy is literally one of the most important things that I do, because they can't do anything without power. And that's power for their systems, right? And there's tactical systems that can do a lot of things, but that's power to turn the lights on in maintenance bays. That's power to, to run the exchanges in the chow halls and all of the other things that come with it, right? So training is facilitated by these other things. When you think about the weapon systems out there, and there's been a lot of talk about weapon systems lately, every single one shoots higher, goes farther at a faster speed than they did 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So what does that mean to me for training? I need more ranges, bigger ranges with more capability. That's why the conversation about Steel Knight, up at Hunter Liggett, up there by Monterey, out in San Clemente, San Nicolas, and Catalina Islands, we have Marines doing training operations. We're trying to work on negotiating some discussion with the state parks to use some California state parks in other unique ways, not drive a bunch of trucks and stuff through them, but small footprint things that give us an opportunity and access to have bigger and better training ranges across the board for the installations. There's UASs, right? Unmanned aerial systems. We can't fly UASs, tactical UASs, over homes, over highways, over any essentially facility, building, a corporation, a company, those kind of things right now. How can we possibly train, if you think about almost every vehicle in the Marine Corps in the next 10 years, when a squad or a platoon or a company of Marines gets out of their vehicles or off their surface connector, right? They're going to drop throw a little drone up in the air that's going to follow them wherever they go and feed into their wrist iPad thing, right? That's reality. We can't do that right now because I can't allow, because of FAA regulations or training restrictions, I can't allow General Watson's team to just go out there and do that because of the integration with the rotary wing and the fixed wing and the other things that shoot and fly and fire. So we have got to figure out how we do that better. And then there's Marine Corps Warfare Fighting Lab that's doing a whole bunch of testing and evaluation of new systems, trying to figure out how to integrate and operate across the littorals in and around island hopping type capability. The Army's biggest exercise that they do is called Project Convergence. And it is a exercise where they bring in all of their newest technology into one place, and they're trying to make sure it all connects and talks to each other to make sure that it will be operable if we get into a Pacific fight. The last 2 years, guess where they've done it? Camp Pendleton, right? Because Camp Pendleton is so unique with a littoral coastline of 17 miles of coast, there's nowhere else in the world that you can land craft along that type of space and have all of the other things that are capable of doing it. It makes me, to be frank to all the Army folks in the room, it makes me a little nervous because they keep coming there, right? And I said to my boss the other day, I'm like, hey, we at some point we need to tell them no, right? And he's like, well, Sir Woody, the SecDef said it's okay. I'm like, oh, who's that? Anyway, so right, there's definitely some things to think about with that, but you know, I always worry about becoming a joint base. I don't want to be a joint base. I want to be a Marine Corps base. So they see the value of the West Coast bases. 75% of our live ordnance ranges are on the West Coast within a 20-minute flight of Camp Pendleton. That's real, right? I think 90% of the ones where you can do large-scale operations are on the West Coast. The East Coast has some limited capability. It is an amazing place for training. For deployment, so ever since World War II, the vast majority of assets from the Marine Corps have gone through the West Coast installation bases and training, or bases and stations. In Vietnam, 70% of every Marine that went to combat and every piece of equipment, food, whatever it was, went through Camp Pendleton or Barstow. Everybody forgets about Barstow. Out there, a little logistics base out in the desert on the way to Vegas. And so truly, the West is the gateway to the Pacific. And if China is our peer adversary and our highest risk, and it is, and we need to be clear-eyed about that, the gateway to the Pacific is and remains Camp Pendleton and the Marine Corps Installations West bases and stations. So how do we support deployments? And the last thing, I'll make one more comment about the Army. My dad was in the Army, by the way, so I'd like to give a little bit of grief to the Army. My wife was in the Navy. We had 3 or 4 services covered, but now that there's a 5th service, I'm kind of losing my joke on that one. But if you think about West Coast Army bases, what are the West Coast major Army bases? There's one up north. There's Irwin, which is a training range, and there's one in Alaska, and that's it, right? Everything else is east of the Mississippi, for the most part. I mean, in Huachuca, there's some smaller stuff. But deployments from the West Coast are going to go through MCI West and naval bases and stations, for sure. When we did that during OIF and OEF, almost every single surface transported equipment or people went out of Long Beach. One port. Who controls the onload and offload technology that goes through, that owns Long Beach port? China, right? If we think that they're not going to try to interrupt those flows, those capabilities, and how you get there, I think we're naive. So we need to figure out how to be more diverse and spread out as we think about going over to the Pacific. If you think about how airplanes were transported to the fight in OIF, OEF, It was almost all out of March. If people went on transport aircraft, they all went out of March. One base. We've got to diversify that and create more opportunity in and around bases like Yuma, Miramar, North Island, and all the way up the coastline into Lemoore and China Lake and all of the other bases on the West Coast. So that's deployment. We need to stay very clearly focused on deployment. Support, I talked a little bit about Barstow. When you think about refit, resupply, Barstow does amazing things with taking older pieces of equipment and turning it into newer pieces of equipment by refitting and refreshing them, providing new technology and just changing the seals and all the things that are consumables in equipment. And that support during that time has to come from the West Coast while we are retraining other Marines to get ready to go back into the fight. And I'll talk a little bit about support of families here when I close after redeployment. For redeployment, we're a temporary home. Marines live there, right? Sailors live on our bases and stations. We want it to be a temporary hometown, that they feel like it's a hometown. Has anybody been in the barracks lately and felt a hometown feel? Yeah, probably not, right? Barracks don't typically have that feeling. We want Marines to feel comfortable there. They should have a safe, clean, hospitable place to put down their head at night and rest to recover and recuperate, right? So when they come back from deployments, that they have the capability to get ready to go do it again as needed. There should be recreation for them. There should be health care for them. There should be mental health care for them, and an opportunity for them to take a little bit of time away from the operational forces and recover. And then the last thing I'll talk about families. We talk a little bit about hometowns. If you think about what we put our spouses and families through in the service, it is a lot. The PCS, a permanent change of station, a move, a change of duty station. There are 5 major things that impact families. There's the move itself, which is a pain to have someone come go through your stuff, pack it up, and move it, right? There's the home, where are you going to live, right? What that's going to look like. If you want to live on Camp Pendleton right now and you're an 04 or above, your wait is 6 months to 18 months. That's reality. So how many families are going to just go wait in a hotel? Not likely. Some live in RVs in the interim. Most go get a place outside the base. That's reality. Then schools, kind of important. People care about schools. If we don't have good schools and capability for our Marines and families to get good educations, they're going to vote with their feet, right? Spouse employment, huge. If we don't start focusing on spouse employment, and then of course health care, dental care, those kind of things. Right now, that last one, we are hurting in medical capability. DHA, the process of incorporating DHA, nothing against the folks doing it, just the process of incorporating DHA has been a challenge, and the desire to reduce the numbers of medical providers. So providing a happy home where Marines rest and recover and then go back to work, I think it's true for everybody. When I'm good at home, I'm better at work. When I'm good at work and I go home and things are pretty good, right, I go back to work pretty good. I'm more effective. Every Lance Corporal, every corporal with a spouse and 2 kids, that applies the same to, right? We have got to do a better job of providing community for our families that live and work, and we're getting after it. For the first time in history, in the legislative priorities of the Commandant of the Marine Corps, installations was mentioned. It's never been in there before. So he had 5 priorities that he put into Congress in the fall or in the spring before the budget season really got going, and it said the word installations. It talked about barracks. It talked about mental health and health care. It talked a lot about facilities and making sure we're upgrading and improving our bases and stations, which is a huge win. And then I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm going to open the can of worms here and talk about force design a little bit. But we can come back to installations here in the Q&A if you'd like to. So my job here is not to refute or defend what's gone on outside in the media or in the public. But I will tell you, my experience as what I try to be an honest broker with my boss, with his boss, and up the chain and down the chain. I went to the Marine Aviation Requirements and Operational Summit. Did I get that right, Marty? The MAROS, which used to be called the MAB and the MCAAs. It's a gathering of all the Marine Corps Aviation team. It was in Dallas, Texas for 3.5 days back in May. And what my observation there is that the majors and lieutenant colonels in the aviation community right now are getting after innovation in a way that is absolutely new. It has not existed in my service, my time in 30 years in the Marine Corps. They are actively looking for ways. We always tried to improve. I'm not saying we didn't try to improve, but the energy behind it right now is just different. And you have to experience it to really understand it. There were some of the alumni there who were, making some comments about the current status of the Marine Corps and force design, and I understand the concerns. I'm not discounting the concerns. I'm just saying the energy and innovation right now is different than it has been in my 30 years in the service. And I think that is directly attributable to thinking the way that we're thinking from the highest levels of the service right now. We occasionally, and Russell's sitting in the room, so we won't disparage any generations. I certainly won't, because I have an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old. So if there's a problem with the teenage generation right now, you're looking at the problem maker, right? We need to look clearly about that, right? I will tell you that there is a sense of entitlement that I don't think that I had when I was a teenager, but they also want to fix stuff in a way that I didn't have when I was a teenager. They see problems and they attack those problems. And so that's what I will tell you from my perspective with incorporation of force design. It is not perfect. It is a mark on a wall that we're moving in a direction, right? And there's maneuver room, left to right lateral limits that we're going to have to make adjustments to. But I do think in the big picture, the Marine Corps has made some changes that are incredibly positive. And I'll close, and this is not meant to disparage any other service, but I am going to go back to the Army for just 1 second because I do this, and that's, it's kind of my shtick when I talk about this. But I do want to talk a little bit about today's Marine. I have a corporal that works in my office. She is 21 years old, and she came in her PT gear after lunch the other day. I was, going down the hall to say hi or something. And I said, hey, Corporal Martinez, how you doing? She's like, oh, good. I said, what have you been up to? She's like, oh, I was just working out. I said, yeah, what are you working on? She's like, oh, CFT. This is 4 months ago or 6 months ago in the last CFT season. So what are you working on? She's like, oh, I'm working on my ammo can lifts. Ammo can lifts are where you take an ammunition can and it's 30 pounds of sand in there and you lift it over your head and you got to do it a certain number of times in 2 minutes. The maximum number for a female Marine of her age, I think, is 64. They said, oh, how'd you do? She's like, well, I'm trying to do better than last year. I said, what'd you do last year? And she's like, I did 98. What'd you do today? 116. I'm like, oh, what's your minimum again, or your maximum again? She's like, 64, I get 100 points. I'm like, you're going for 116. I'm like, that's a Marine, right? That's a Marine today. I went on my joint tour. I was in an Army command. They were down doing push-ups, and the fittest Marine that I worked out, or soldier that I worked out with occasionally there on my joint tour, at 47 push-ups, he stopped and got up. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I just passed. 116, just passed. It's just a different mindset, right? And what I would say to you about Marines, and nothing against soldiers. Soldiers are incredible people. They just have a different perspective. And I will say that I think that perspective that young men and women, like Russell over there, that come in this service at this time are just going to continue to make this place better and better. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'm happy to take questions, sir, however you want to handle this. I never knew what an ink stick was, Master Guns, until right now I do, and I have my ink stick, so I'm ready.
All righty, sir. Got a question here. First, thank you for your presentation. My question is about technology. Almost inevitably, in a combat situation, technology such as GPS, communications, guidance systems, etc., will break down. How are we training to maintain combat effectiveness when modern technology is no longer available to add as an advantage?
Yeah, great question. And so I will say that it is absolutely something that we are very focused on. And it was what I would say is our biggest weakness is the connection between. I don't have that many problems with the phone in my hand, right? When I have a problem with my phone, it's because of the connection. It's not updating correctly. It's not getting a signal. It's not getting whatever that connection back and forth is. So we are looking at ways to build redundancy. You've heard Starlink, right? The Tesla, Elon Musk capability, right? Marines are using Starlink right now in combat environments as a backup to the typical tactical green gear, what we call it, right? That looks more like a dish. Guess which one's faster? I didn't say that out loud, though. You guys said it. So, but we are looking at all sorts of ways to make sure that there's redundancy in the communication between the pieces of technologies. And yes, the tech is going to break down. That is something we are trying to build resiliency in. Back to the power discussion, in order to update systems, we need power. So we need remote power. We need more smaller, capable systems that can provide generation on place in smaller organizations. So that's one of the big areas we're focused on, is to be able to provide the power, to provide the update to the systems where they will come in, plug in, re-update, and go. And then I would say the last part of the answer to the question is the Marines that are working on the gear, right? No, I'm sure nobody in this room has ever handed their phone to their kid or grandkid and gone like, fix this for me. You know, every time I see my mother, she hands me her phone. It's like, I need you to get my email back. It went away. Right? I'm like, what'd you do? She's like, I don't know, it just went away. I'm like, okay, right. You got to go into settings. You got to go down to Safari, right? You have to figure it. I just said Safari. I'm wrong. My kids would be like, what are you doing, Dad? Right? So those young men and women are absolutely magnificent at this in a way that we weren't as good. So, all right. This is a unique situation for me. I've never had someone else ask your questions before. And I'm happy to transition into a more direct approach if you prefer. Yeah, Master Guns.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. Could you, as a Marine aviator, could you state unequivocally the king of battle?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Could you state unequivocally the king of battle?
So I know who asked that question. So it's hard. It's hard. General Rocco, should I just speak my mind? Should I just speak my mind freely? Okay. All right, sir. So since the dawn of aviation, Vooch, what has killed more enemy on the battlefield? You're welcome. I will give you the title of the king of battle, though, however. The artillery guys in the room, love you all. There you go, Master Guns. Hoorah. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Right now, if anybody would like to ask a general question, I'll be glad to hand you the microphone.
Sir, I can come to you and repeat it if needed.
So with the apparent shift of India from Russia to the United States as far as military things go, how's that going to affect the balance of power in the Pacific? Just any comments on that? I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Great question, obviously, with the current events. I would say that it's absolutely good news for the U.S. that there is a shift there. I am not an expert in India relations, but I would say that I think as any non-superpower would, they're playing both sides to a certain extent. I think that they're going to continue to buy Russian and Chinese military equipment, and they're going to try to buy U.S. military equipment as well. You know how our rules work with that. We are very careful about our foreign military sales. But I think, honestly, in the big picture, if India moves more and more toward the west, the better off we are going to be in the Pacific with having someone that is going to balance out kind of the Chinese north of them situation. And I think in reality, you know, if you think about the structure of their government, it's far more like ours in the big picture than it is like the PRC. And I really think that that's what they're probably coming to a realization of, is that, you know, we may not be quite, in the world's eyes, we may not quite be the beacon on the hill, the Reagan quote of the 80s that he used. I think we still are, but we may not be in the world's eyes, but I do think that there's a little bit of a shift toward a little Western thinking in India, and I think absolutely embrace that as much as possible. I read the BBC most mornings, and there was a lot of talk about what the U.S. embraced, or how much went into the U.S.'s hosting of Modi, and how we rolled out the red carpet across government in a very positive way. So I think there's a lot more there. But that part of partnerships is in the National Defense Strategy, is something that we've been working really hard on. I touched on it in small portions about the way the logistics group is doing it, and that's something we need to continue to do. I would argue that the Philippines relationship is better than it's been since we really pulled naval forces out of the PI in the 70s and 80s. We made a lot of headway there as well. So thanks for the question, sir. Sir.
So could you talk about distributed warfare and some of the reshaping that's happened with the force, what capabilities we're enhancing to replace some that we're losing, such as tank capability,
Yeah.
And what's happening with our AAVs, because we're looking at amphibious littoral warfare in the Pacific. What are we doing about that?
Yeah, great question. So as you know, the end of the AAV came quicker than kind of anybody anticipated in the Marine Corps, at least going into the water, because we had a couple of accidents. You know, the main accident where we lost a large number of Marines and a couple of sailors. I would tell you that tanks are gone. I mean, they're literally sold and gone. We are down to less than 100 tankers in the Marine Corps. Most of them are in schoolhouses teaching something, you know, Staff NCO Academy type things, or are colonels or lieutenant colonels or above, kind of being the OPSO at the MEF or the regiment or something along those kind of lines. The ACV is coming along a little more slowly than we anticipated, but its capability is better in time. They're working out some of the surf zone, the transition of the surf, because it is a different shaped vehicle than the AAV. And the AAV was a little more stable in the surf zone than the ACV is. But in all of the other combat arenas, except for that surf zone, the ACV is significantly improved in technology, firepower, armament, all of those, in self-protection capability as well. As far as getting, you know, fighting without tanks, there's been a lot of discussion about that, right? The Commandant's focus on China is a very different fight in the Pacific than a European type campaign. The Army still has tanks, and frankly, they have some of our tanks now. And his mindset of operating in a joint force is one of the big reasons that I think he made the decision to move away from tanks. Though getting rid of tanks has been being discussed in the Marine Corps for at least 10 years. It came up in the 2010 to 2012, because using tanks kind of online in the way it was done in World War II has not really happened very much since then. So obviously we used them in Vietnam some, but not in the typical maneuver fashion. And getting tanks from surface connectors to the shore is an incredible challenge. So is it a decrease in firepower? Yes, but some of the capability of the systems that are coming along should be able to cover for that over time. Yeah, go ahead.
So are we increasing our close defensive air support capability to compensate for that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, back to Vuch's question about the king of battle, right? Artillery changes in the Marine Corps. There's a lot more in the guided system capability, precision fires, loitering munitions, which are essentially drones out there waiting, looking for a target, and when they're designated on something, they go hit that target with almost as much firepower, if not more, than a tank round typically, which is, as you know, usually used in direct fire, sometimes in indirect fire mode. Get after your question a little bit? No, go for it. Are you a tanker? Okay, okay.
So what's the time frame that the Marine Corps is preparing for
So, you know, Force Design 2030 is the label. There have been others who are far senior to me that have talked about an accelerated timeline. I think that we are going absolutely as fast as we possibly can. I think the reality is if China does do something, you know, some have anticipated them being ready to do something as early as 26, 27, which, think about that, that's 10 minutes from now, right, in the development of capability. So we have to keep pushing as fast as we possibly can. So, get after it? Okay, all right, good. What other questions? Sir?
Sir, does artificial intelligence
Yes, sir.
fit in anywhere into the Marine Corps plans in the future?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And I am not an expert in AI. I will just state that right up front. I have high schoolers, and I know what ChatGPT is, right? You may have kids or grandkids that, you know, I never use ChatGPT, right? The reality is that what I think the best use of AI right now for us is in the data analytics role, which probably is not quite actual AI. And as we develop that data analytics where we can process more information more quickly and distribute that information more quickly, I think that will be some of the benefits that we're seeing from things like ChatGPT capability. But absolutely, all in. Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, McWill, is doing a lot of test and design and development with folks in the AI world. And then DIUX, Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, is in, it's near here, San Jose, right down the road, right, sir? Palo Alto, thanks. They are kind of leading the defense, the DoD industry, on how we get after using AI in the Department of Defense. Yes, sir. Yeah, good. Oops.
Sir, how does, this is back to the installations, I can't believe I'm asking an installations question. How does...
There's an implication there that that's boring.
It is kind of boring.
I've always...
Tank rounds are a lot more fun to talk about.
Yeah.
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 How does the community, veteran community, people who support the military, how do they assist MCI-West, the installations and bases, in achieving their goals, putting pressure, putting advocacy? Like, how does that happen? How could it happen better? How could people like those of us in the audience better support you, what your efforts are, what's needed to support our future force?
It's a good question, Hoops. And there's, you know, there's a couple things that I'll get after in your question, I hope. If I don't get there, then let me know. If I had the ability to influence one part of the organization, the federal government organization, to change the way they do business and to allow for us to do things, higher, faster, farther, unmanned. You probably know the three-letter organization I'm talking about. It's FAA. My flight this morning was 45 minutes late due to fog. I was annoyed, right? If it goes back to the routing of your flight from the East Coast to the West Coast, adds 30 minutes to the time it used to be, people are going to be annoyed by that, right? We need the FAA and other federal entities to listen more carefully to the DoD in the requirements for things that need to occur to be able to do true operational training at scale in long ranges. You know, the fight for 29 Palms, there's an airspace fight for 29 Palms up in Fallon, Nevada, where the Navy's primary training, pre-deployment training base is. They just won a huge, long battle. And so any advocacy for those kind of things and the realization when the community goes, the FAA just changed the rules to make all of our flights longer, right? And less on time because they have to go around more things that we need. That's something that people could help with. In the day-to-day operations of the installations, I would just say the support for the folks that live in the community, for the military members that live in the community. And then there are tons of organizations like this one, but on Camp Pendleton, the three big ones are the Armed Services YMCA. So anything YMCA is huge benefit to Marines directly, whether that's childcare. The USO is huge benefit from whether, you know, we all think of concerts when we think of USO. They do school and training and help with baby care and learning how to parent, all of these other awesome things. And Navy Marine Corps Relief Society are three non-federal entities that are on installations across the country and just do absolutely incredible work. So ways to support them, I'm not saying financially necessarily, there's all sorts of ways to support those three organizations, and also organizations like this that do great things for Marines and sailors. So the relationship with the community, though, is something that I would continue to bring up, is wherever your community, wherever you live, right, the more generous mindset about military using your state park to do a 3-vehicle landing. Joe Hamlin's nodding his head because the Governor's Military Council is a huge part in us trying to get more access to California state parks. But that's state parks across the country. We need more access to be able to go do some training and not have people, you know, take to the papers about the invasion, you know, that is inevitable to a certain extent. Is that it? Thanks, Oops. Appreciate it.
All right, Woody, what an incredible speech. I'll put it in perspective for some folks who maybe haven't won the EGA. There are about 180,000 Marines in the Marine Corps, roughly. There are only 80 general officers. Every one of those general officers is a warfighter. And there's a reason why the Commandant selected a fighter pilot with combat experience to lead the Marine Corps' largest base, supporting the Marine Corps' largest MEF. And that's why Woody is the guy. And he just showed his chops right here. He could talk about electricity, he could talk about that. There's a reason why Marty is down at Miramar. He's an attack pilot. So the Marine Corps takes the bases and the stations and all of that extremely serious, and Woody is an example of that. He's a war fighter. You've proven that. You know your stuff. You know your chops. It's an honor to have you up here. Our best to Renee. We're going to have some dinner, and we're going to send you back on leave so you can join your family. But a round of applause. Thank you for those wonderful comments.
Thank you all. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To learn more about the organization and our programs, please visit our website at marinesmemorial.org.